Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Suresh Done, the co-founder and chief AI officer of AI Authority. So welcome to our inaugural virtual event. So this is the first big event that we are doing. So we have three presentations for today. So the first presentation is going to be, on the how the AI authorities approach for responsible AI. Before actually doing this, I will take 10 or 15 minutes to introduce AI authority and to explain what we are doing from an AI authority perspective. Then I will get into our approach to the responsible AI. And the second presentation is uh, from Robert. So when machines decide, who do you trust, right? So that is our as that is the second presentation. So Robert is from a global head of the industry relations from Feedzai. And the third one is from Taiye, from HISPI. HISPI is Holistic Information Systems Security and Privacy Institute. They have a trusted architecture artificial intelligence model score. So he will walk through us, what that model is and how to do the evaluation and all. So let me introduce AA Authority. Now, so AA Authority is a for-profit organization started in September. So it's a very new organization. And when I told people about AA Authority, they all liked about the name, the AA Authority. But somehow I feel like I have to clarify what this authority means, right? So and what it doesn't mean, right? So first of all, we don't mean authority means it's commanding or demanding, right? Hey, you should do this, do that. You shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that, right? So we are not that kind of organization. And then we don't want to apply compliance forcefully, right? So what we want to handhold, give guidance, and make sure that the organizations are compliant with the regulations, standards, and all. And for sure, we don't want to control people or control organizations. We just want to be a helping hand for the organizations, especially in their AI journey. And we don't want to take credit for any of the anyone's intellectual property. So we want to give credit to where the credit lies, and we want to take only for the credit for what we are doing. And so I want to keep that up front. And then so we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? So there's a lot of work being done in the industry. So a lot of people are doing some research. They're implementing AI solutions, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we want to reuse as much as possible. So coming to what we are, as I said, we want to guide the organization. We want to provide the guidance to individuals and organizations to make sure that they are doing all the right things. And okay, and we want to be collaborative. So we want to have as many partnerships as possible, and so that we can create value to the industry, right? Rather than fighting for it. Okay. And we want to do some research, on various aspects, and we will be letting you know that what kind of research we are getting and all that. Okay. So there will be some notifications shortly. Actually, we had a poll on what kind of industry reference architectures you would like for AI, and we got a good response. And based on that response, we will start this research activities. And then, as I said, we want to give the credit where the credit lies, and we don't want to take the credit, for others' works, right? And we want to reuse as much as possible, right, rather than reinventing the wheel. So clarifying that, what our authority means. So now let me explain what this AI authority is. So AI authority is an ecosystem, right? So we're not one nation trying to do something. So we are building an ecosystem where everyone has a role in it. So for example, if someone wants to build AI solutions, they can come to us. They can put their use cases to us, and we will make sure that use cases are built in a responsible manner. And then we have the solution providers, so who can provide the solutions, who can implement the use cases that these end users had come up with. And we have AI experts, so who will be part of our AI architecture board, AI authority architecture board, and they will be, hand-holding the end users as well as the solution providers to make sure that their solutions are built in a responsible, trustworthy, unbiased, fair, right? All these things. And then the auditors also will be there, who can do the audits on some regulations and maturity assessments and all that. And then we have tool vendors who are specialized in certain tools, so they can be part of this ecosystem as well. And then we have trainers who can train on our frameworks that we developed. I'll show you the frameworks in a minute. And also they can come up with their own trainings as well and publish through AI Authority. And then we want to work with the regulatory and standards bodies to evaluate and to evolve the standards. So hopefully we'll have some relationship with this regulatory bodies and standards bodies in near future, and we will be able to do that. And finally, last but not the least, so the AI aspirants who wants to become who wants to come into the AI industry, right? So be it through training or whatever, right? So they can come to AI Authority and learn about the AI technologies and become an AI expert in the future. So this is the ecosystem that we are creating. Again, so these are some of the roles that we thought of, but anyone, I think, can come to AI Authority and reap the benefits from what we are doing. Okay. So with that, let me walk you through, what we are trying to accomplish. So what this ecosystem is supposed to do, right? So here, let's say we have end users who want some use case to be developed, right? So they come to AI Authority and submit their use case. And then the AI Authority will allocate at least 3 or 4 board members. Again, that number is not concrete. So any numbers depending on that use case, we will allocate some board members who are the AI experts to that use case. And they will evaluate the use case, right? And then they provide that feedback to the end user. So even if the feedback is negative, let's say they said there is no value in developing that use case, still sometimes the end user wants to go ahead and implement that use case. Now, once they decided to go ahead with the implementation, now these AI Authority architecture board members will provide high-level architecture and design, and then so they also provide or select the products that needs to be used for that solution, and who the vendor or the implementation team who are the solution provider, right? So we can select the solution provider as well. And then they guide throughout the whole SDLC, right? In all the phases of the SDLC, right from the requirements to the design to the coding, testing, deployment, and post-deployment. So they will guide throughout the whole life cycle to make sure that that solution is responsible, trustworthy, unbiased, fair, transparent, etc., etc. So that's the whole intent of establishing this AI authority. Okay, so we already seen some lot of interest in this business model. Many people from all facets, from the end users to the solution providers to the AI experts, are becoming a member of the AI authority. Okay, so if you want to become a member of AI authority, you can go to our website and click on the membership menu and then register yourself. Now, that gives you a brief introduction to the AI authority. Now, let me walk you through our approach to the responsible AI. Again, responsible doesn't mean it means everything, right? So it should be transparent, trustworthy, fair, unbiased, etc. So I'm considering everything when I say responsible. It is everything. Okay. Now, what does responsible means? So we want to take an architectural approach to this responsible AI because people are talking about responsible AI, but I hadn't seen much a structured approach to this responsible AI, right? And we want to make sure that all the systems that are built in this in the world are secure, governed, scalable, explainable, and value driven. Again, it's not just a checklist, it's an unified operating model and architectural approach to this responsible AI. Okay. And so with that, now, first of all, why we need this responsible AI, right? Now, if you look at the industry, there are a lot of incidents. So when you go to this incident database.ai, we have a lot of, around 5,000 incidents, documented. So I don't know, there may be many undocumented as well, but you can see that there are, AI, solutions that are developed are causing a lot of harm than good so far, right? So of course, the good is also happening, but we want to make sure that the harm is bare minimal, right? So we have systems in place that doesn't harm the society, right? So you might have seen some unauthorized AI deepfake, which kind of form created a deepfake for some I think Philippines actors on pornography and all. So those things are happening right now. And then AI bot so post some racist, sexist, and anti-Semitic content on the Twitter. Okay, and then there's a lawsuit on the teacher evaluation system, right? So in New York, I think, so there was a teacher evaluation system which kind of biased, right? So there are and people think that that evaluation is not correct, right? So there are many lawsuits on that. And then some deep fakes used some fraud and influence operations on the social platforms, right? So they are, doing lots of, unethical things on the social platform. And we had heard of some robot stabbing a man to death at a factory in India in a manufacturing organization, right? And autonomous vehicles, right? They fail to detect the pedestrians or any obstructions. So this was probably in the early days, but now things are getting better. But still, there are these incidents happening every time, every day, or every month. So we've been seeing this over and over again. And source code leaks via public LLM. So people put their source code to to debug or whatever into the LLMs, and their source code is kind of stolen, right? So those things are leaked, right? So those things are happening. And AI, sent a delivery van into dangerous terrain, right? So those things are happening. And OpenClaw lately, I think I heard that, it started deleting emails for the employees. And even after instructing to stop, it even deleted more emails, than before. So these things are happening every day, day in and day out. So that's why we need to put some systems in place to make sure that we are achieving that responsible AI within the organizations, okay, or in the industry as a whole. Now, one thing we need to ask ourselves is, in this whole dynamic AI environment, so when the AI scales, when the AI is rampant, right? So I think you can see that everyone is building AI solutions right now. Now, who owns this accountability if something goes wrong, right? Do we have to blame the AI systems, or do we have to blame the people who developed that AI systems, or the people who are using that one, right? Whom we are supposed to blame, right? Or who takes the accountability, right? And is our architecture AI ready, right? So are we building the right solutions, right? Or can we trace data across AI pipelines? Right? Are the wrappers and the AI APIs governed, right? So the API is supposed to are doing what they're supposed to do, right? And is the security embedded or reactive, right? So are we, proactive in, or is your security by design, or is it, afterthought, right? So those things, so we need to think through, right? So responsible AI is no longer a philosophy. It's an enterprise infrastructure. It's become the most important aspect of the AI, right? So we cannot ignore this and still do it because So what we have done earlier, right? So, before, when the IT has started, right? So, that dot-com bubble burst, right? So why it happened? Because we are not responsible at that time, right? But after 25 years, we still the same trend going on in the AI space as well. So, which is, unacceptable because, we should have learned lessons from the dot-com bubble burst. So if you are in the same stage, I think we hadn't learned any lesson. Okay. So if you look at the industry, there are a lot of positives. So we have AI systems supporting autonomous vehicles. So if you know how the autonomous vehicles work, right? So they do a lot of things, right? So they identify the objects, right? Object detection and, working with the GPS, right? Everything, right? So it contains a lot of, technology involved in it, right? So we are able to do these wonders, right? So the car is able to, drive by itself, right? And we are able to generate any code and deploy it, right? Autonomously without any hand coding at all, right? And we are able to do some fraud detection in the real time, right? If there is any fraudulent activity, so it can trigger and stop that activity before it even becomes a fraud. And then we have insurance underwriting being automated. So there is no human needed to underwrite the insurance policies. So that whole process is automated now, right? And clinical decision support systems, right? So if you want to take any decision whether there's a cancer in a patient or not, so we are able to do that through AI, right? And then so we are able to support the trading and risk modeling in a financial institutes, right? And then the enterprise AI assistants, the co-pilots are able to, help on any administrative task, right? So all these wonders are happening, but yet, you know, are we building all these systems following some standards, right? Processes, best practices, regulations, And are we applying the right principles to these solutions or not, right? And do we have the right, building blocks identified? So if that foundation is not built, right? So we will, go down the pipe, someday or the other, right? So that's what happened during the dot-com bubble burst as well, right? So let's not repeat the history again. So let's not do the, same mistake over and over again, right? So let's build systems based on this, this foundation. So do not build anything without establishing this foundation. So so as one of the quality guru, Edward Deming, I guess probably you might all know. So he said, you know, people have that all the time to do the wrong things over and over again, but we don't have the time to sit back and think what is right and do the right things. So that is what we are doing. We are repeating the same mistake over and over again. So let's not do that. Let's sit back. Let's think through what is good for the industry, what is good for the world, and then let's develop that responsible AI systems. Okay, and so as a part of that, that activity that to build this responsible AI. So what we did from an AI authority perspective, we built some frameworks and some toolkits. And we also, are taking the inputs from the standards and regulations that are coming in. So as I said, we will be working with the standards bodies and regulations in future, and we'll try to make the standards better and better so that we can achieve the responsible AI. So coming to the frameworks, we have developed so many frameworks. I think right now we have around 11 or 12 frameworks, but we will be adding more and more. So we have taken a top-down approach. I will explain this in a minute, what I mean by the top-down approach. So we have a frameworks on AI strategy, enterprise AI architecture, AI solution architecture, AI engineering, AI operations, AI integration, governance, and security. Right. So, and I think there are a few more, I think. And then we have toolkits like on how and assessing the maturity of the organization on the AI and the readiness, right? Whether the organizations are ready for that change or not. And then the regulatory compliance, bias and impact, fairness, right? Bias, impact, and fairness assessments. So all these are the toolkits that we have developed. Now let me explain. So all these the frameworks, what I mean by that, right? So these are the frameworks that we came up with, and as I said, it is a top-down approach. Now, why we need that top-down approach, I will explain when I'm going through these frameworks. So we have to start with the AI strategy, right? If any organization is planning to build their AI, so they have to start with the AI strategy. And then we have to architect the AI across the enterprise. It's not just for one solution or so, right? So we have to first look at the whole enterprise and determine what we need for that AI. And then we need a solution architecture. So once we do the enterprise AI architecture, we might have identified some solutions that we need, right? And we have to architect those solutions. And then once we architect those solutions, we have to code, right? We have to build those AI solutions. So AI engineering comes into play. And then to run these AI systems, we need AI computing, right? So be it the CPUs or GPUs or whatever. So how do we determine what is the best CPU computing capability that we need? And then how do we deploy our AI solutions and operate them, right? So which is handled in the AI operations. And AI integration is where we can build integration between multiple systems, multiple models, right? So it's nowadays we can integrate multiple models. It's a multi-model solution. So we can build such kind of solutions which can reap the benefits of the best in all the models. And overall, to do all these things, we need AI governance, right? And also AI security across all this. Now, let me explain what this AI strategy, all these frameworks mean, right? Now, so when I'm going through these frameworks, I don't want to explain these frameworks here. Rather, I want to give some analogies so that you can think through why these frameworks are needed and what is the need of those frameworks, and why AA authority has taken this approach. Okay. Now, first thing that we need to do is the AI to build the AI strategy, right? Now, so what do you mean by the AI strategy, right? So what are our requirements, right? So let me put this city planning analogy here. So let's say there's a city, right? And which is probably it could be an empty space or an existing city, either way, right? So you've been asked to plan that city. So when you are planning the whole city, that is always compared to enterprise architecture, right? But when you are doing specifically something like AI, right? So let's say you are asked to plan in the power line for power supply for the whole city. So let's say you've been given that task. Now, how do we approach that? Right? Who are our stakeholders? What are their requirements? What is the vision? So by 2030, we want to have power for all the new houses built, right? Whatever, right? So you can define that vision for the next 3 to 5 years or even more. And then, so now, is there a value in building this, the power supply, right? Why we need that? Is there any business value? Is there any societal value, right? Is there any technological value, right? So we need to determine, what value that vision is giving to the stakeholders. Now, once we decided that there is a value and we need to go for it, now then we have to assess whether the organization is ready for that change or not, right? And how are we going to enable those, right? What are the enablers for this one? So for example, if you need a power line, so probably what kind of power supply you want to give. So you want something outside like poles, or do you need any underground as power supply? So depending on that, what are the enablers, right? What do you need to build that infrastructure? And now once you find those enablers, what is the roadmap? Right? So in these 3 to 5 years, what are the activities that you need to do to build those enablers? And ultimately, we have that capability of the power, right? The power supply. And are there any implementation, high level things that you need to identify, or, to come up with something that you need? Okay. So the implementation strategy. And then, so this is the enterprise AI architecture. So as I said, this is compared to, now you had determined what are your needs, right? So then you have to plan for that. And that plan is for that whole city. It's not just for one building or one thing that you are doing. It is for the whole city, meaning you have to plan what kind of AI systems you need, and then decide what all the things that you need, right? So this is the framework. Now this is the city planning, right? So you are planning for the whole city. But when it comes to the technology, our technocrats are saying that we don't need such a plan, right? We want to build the buildings, beautiful buildings, even though it is built on, on the road, right, in the middle of the road, or obstructing some other things, right? Or even the infrastructure has to be, built over and over again. We are okay with that. We don't bother. We want to build these beautiful houses. We don't bother about this planning at all. That is what is happening in the industry for the past, 50 years, from an IT perspective I'm talking about, right? From an IT and AI perspective. So, AI was there for long. It's even though it's more popular in the past 10 to 15 years, I had worked on AI in early 90s. So it's there been for a while, but even then we were just building these AI systems without any plan at all. And that's how these disasters are happening, right? We cannot let this go, over a period of time, right? So we have to stop this. We need to, plan on what we need from an AI perspective and build the right AI solutions rather than building haphazard, ad hoc solutions, which may or may not be good for the society, which may or may not be good for the enterprise, right? So unless we plan, I think we won't be in a good place. So that is what I want to emphasize. So there is a big need for enterprise AI architecture because most of the organizations, even the large organizations, they are not planning at all. They are just building some AI solutions. So business needs this, let's build it. Okay. Yeah. So, it is serving some purpose, but is it aligned to the organization's goals and objectives? Is it meeting the principles or not? Right? Or have we identified the right enablers? And moreover, the infrastructure, right? So the infrastructure can be shared across the enterprise, but none of us are doing that, right? So because of this lack of planning, we are not able to, do a better job, especially in terms of AI. Okay, so let's let's plan first. Let's spend some time. Not so you don't have to spend a whole lot of time, but even if you just spend some time on planning these things upfront, so everyone will be, most of the organizations will be in a better position. Okay, so that is what I want to emphasize regarding this enterprise AI architecture. And once you do the enterprise architecture, meaning when you do the city planning, you might have identified that we need, some residential buildings, some, corporate buildings, some industrial buildings, so on and so forth. So you had identified what kind of systems you need for for the organization, right? So now, so let's say you had identified that we need residential buildings. Now, how do you plan the residential buildings is what this solution architecture is. So now let's say you wanted a fraud detection AI system, right? Now, how do we build that fraud detection AI system, right? AI solution. So we have to plan for it, right? So that is this one. Again, so people are, even this one is missing, right? So now, as let's say you're a building architect, right? So you're designing the building. Now, first of all, you need to know what are the city norms, right? And then you design your building according to the norms. So when it comes to technology, when it comes to AI, we neither know the norms, right? From an enterprise AI perspective, we're neither planning the building as well. We're just starting building the building, right? So there are people, I see a lot of people who hate this, planning and design and all. They just want to build things, which is okay, right? So but if you don't have that, that plan, everything will fall apart, right? So that is what is happening. So let's not make that, the buildings, fail, right? So, so we have to, you know, plan the solution, we have to design the solution and then start implementing. And again, for implementations, there are many things that you can look at. So there's, AI as a bigger umbrella, and then we have machine learning algorithms and then neural networks. and deep learning, which is a set of neural networks again to do a lot of computation, and generative AI, which can generate anything, right? An image or a video or whatever, and then LLMs, which can do everything, and then agentic AI, which can autonomously develop anything, right? So there's a lot of technologies around all these things, but what are the best practices we have, right? So if you follow those best practices, maybe our solutions will be stable. Okay. So this is, when you're building the AI solutions or AI engineering frameworks come into play. Okay. So guys, if you have any questions, please keep it in, put your questions in the, comment box. I will answer the questions probably in the last 5 minutes or so. And once you had developed these solutions, right? So AI solutions need a lot of computation, right? And the computation can happen at multiple levels. Some computation can happen at the in the cloud, where you are more using some the cloud AI for training purposes, and then these GPUs, TPUs for the deep learning, and then for edge computing we can use the CPUs and FPGA. So these will help you. So we have cloud computing, we have edge computing, we have fog computing, which help you to do the computation according to your needs, right? So for example, for autonomous cars, right? So the car cannot rely on cloud computing to take a decision when there is some obstruction, when it sees some pedestrian or something, right? So then probably edge computing comes into play, right? And in between you can have fog computing. So these are, you have to decide what kind of computing you need for what kind of use case. Okay. And then once you build your AI solutions, we need to deploy those AI solutions and operate those AI solutions. And here we get the help from our AI ops framework, which helps you how to build the solutions and how do you deploy them using the DevOps concepts and all that. Okay. And then we have the integration framework, right? So how you going to integrate with multiple systems, multiple tools, multiple models, right? And leverage the capabilities of other systems and other models as well. So this integration framework will help you to build that one. And then the governance, right? So this is the most important one, or which is the most missed one in the organizations. So not many organizations have a very good, governance model established, right? So we need to identify what are the roles that are involved in this AI development, right? And who are the people involved in the operations, and what is the operation model? Are there any risks, and do we need to be compliant with any regulations and all? And what tools we use for monitoring and all, right? And then the governance, how the models are being governed, and have we established the right policies and standards, and how we monitor the solutions once it is developed. So the overall, what we are trying to do is we are trying to make the AI solutions responsible, which are transparent. Explainable means you should be able to explain how the AI is taking the decisions, right? So that is very important, because earlier AI systems are seen as a what do you call black boxes, right? But when disasters started to happen, incidents started to happen, people thought, okay, this is not good. So we need to know how these AI systems are built or are taking decisions, right? So that we can be confident of the decisions made by the AI, right? And how do we make sure that there is an accountability right? Metrics, traceability established, and how we make sure that the systems are ethical, right? And fair and so unbiased, right? And they should be trustworthy as well. So these are the various aspects we need to keep in mind. And then security, right? Again, security is very important for many for all the organizations, right? Especially AI security, because there are some threat agents who are trying to use AI for fraudulent activities. So we need to stop them, right? We need to be better. Now, one of the things that I see in the industry from a security perspective is most of us take some tactical actions, right? Or reactive. We are more reactive than being, proactive, right? So security by design is an important principle that we need to follow, right? So we need to think of security upfront, right? Rather than being an afterthought. So that is very important. And the second thing that I see is, we decide on, what actions we need to take when something goes wrong and all, right? But so we are not flexible, we are not agile. So we stick to that plan, right? Or that. What do you call, so that the procedure that we had came up with. But sometimes we have to be agile, or sometimes if you see more vulnerabilities, right, in the organization, we may have to re-architect, we have to take a different approach altogether, and and become more secure than fixing things here and there, right? So that's what I see, especially in the security, standpoint. Like, so we are mostly fixing things very tactically rather than taking a holistic approach and doing and security architecture, so rather than being very tactical, very ad hoc. Okay. So that's what I want to keep in mind. And then, so risk management is also one thing that we need to do. Okay. So now, what people say is, when we do things, right? So when we are responsible or when we are following some standards and all, we lose innovation. No, we don't lose innovation, right? So both can go hand in hand. So you need to take a balanced approach when you have to be standardized and when you have to, innovate. So that is the decision that needs to be taken by the governing body, right? Governance body. And as we are moving from experimentation to, engineered AI, we need good governance, good frameworks in place, and that is what we are working on. Okay. And executive imperative, right? And so I'm just flipping the slides here. So that is basically what is our approach. So let me see if there are any questions. I don't see, yeah, I see some 3 charts here. Let me look at these charts. Not seen a privacy framework. Probably, and our frameworks are also evolving. Probably privacy and security go hand in hand. So we will include privacy also in the security framework. So it's still evolving as I see. Okay. How do you ensure veracity and variety of data being before a solution is built? So that's what. So if you had gathered the high level requirements and what we are trying to solve and what kind of data we need, right? So if you had put that thought upfront, probably you will have an idea of what data you're dealing with and how to handle that data, rather than getting into the solution and thinking about the data, in the solution phase is too late. So that's what I would say, probably. And then AI governance, do we mean its observability? Observability is one part of the governance. As I've shown, there are many things that we have to look at from a governance perspective, right? So observability is just one part of it. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. So now let me see if my second presenter, yes, Robert is there. Robert, should I give you the host? I mean, presenter.
Yeah, if you can stop presenting, then I will just present. If
Oh,
that's
okay.
okay.
All right. Yeah.
Let me see if that works.
Um,
Okay.
since lack of time, I will let you introduce yourself. Okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Suresh. Yes, thanks everybody. So I'm Robert Harris. So I look after industry relations at Feedzai. And if you haven't heard of Feedzai, we are the backbone to many fraud and financial prevention systems in the world, both on networks and also in financial institutions. Um, Portuguese company, about one of the things that we need to do to keep ahead of the criminals in our space of fraud and financial crime prevention is to make sure we invest very heavily in research. And out of that research, we've established 2 years ago what we call the trust framework. Um, Actually, a lot of what Suresh was saying overlaps quite closely with the framework here. So it's quite interesting that the different paths have come to the same answers. But first of all, just let me say, I'll take you through the framework, but let's first of all decide why do we need to talk about trust. Again, Suresh has touched on this, so I'll just go a little bit fast through this. So we can see that there's been a lot of emphasis on trust as increasingly AI is being used to make decisions, um, both in terms of direct decisions, but also in assisting humans. We need to make sure they're practical measures that can make sure that the interests of the consumer, first and foremost, remain the top priority. So, obviously, when you've got competing priorities for delivering software and delivering code and delivering performance in terms of a business advantage, sometimes there's a danger the trust aspects and the fairness will be something where the corners are cut. And so we need to have these frameworks in place to make sure that everything is done to make sure that's compliant. So for us to build AI trust, there needs to be at least three foundational pillars. That's AI safety, which is preventing unintended or catastrophic harm. We have AI assurance, so making sure that the systems function reliably and as intended and don't start doing things that they weren't intended to do. And then thirdly, again, as Suresh mentioned, was the accountability. So, when a vendor like Feedzai is providing software that's AI driven, AI native, in fact, with Feedzai, um, into financial institutions, who is going to be ultimately accountable? Um, it's still got to be clarified and specified clearly. We know where those boundaries lie. So, what did we do about it? So 3 years ago, we introduced what we call fair GBM because we realized that in a fight between performance and trust, then there could be a tendency to favor performance. So what we did, we took light GBM models in AI and we extended them to make sure that we can get balance with fairness. It's a bit like a racing car, right? When you say you've got to go and win, and the racing driver is very highly incentivized to go and win the race, sometimes you see them cutting corners. And fair GBM is just like that. It makes it much, much harder to say you must go and win, but please don't break any rules, right? Because ultimately it's going to come back and, it will come back and have consequences. So how does it work? So we built into fairness. So in trying to fix the data before putting it through the AI models, we built in fairness. So a way of assessing the fairness of the AI models as well as the performance. And so before this, we found that there was always had to be a sort of compromise. You had to balance, say, better performance with lower fairness or vice versa. You're never going to get 100% fairness, but you can see on this screen where we've mapped out is that with light GBM, which represent the orange dots, we ran different models, and you could see that performance could be high, but the fairness with the orange dots was generally lower. And when we've adapted this fair GBM model, it's been open sourced, so we've made it available on GitHub for anybody who wants to try and use it. These models, which are, I say, an improvement on light GBM. Um, so we took this approach, and then that was 3 years ago, and we've extended it out, and we said, right, in our world um, of fraud and financial crime prevention, you have to move fast because the criminals do. To give you an idea what that means for Feedzai, you can see that in terms of the impact that we have in protecting the financial systems of the world, we're quite significant in terms of the value of the transactions we process. It's 8 billion. That was back in 24. It's been growing rapidly. And now most payment systems are moving to real time. So that means that we have to produce the vast majority of scores. So you can see 99.99% of transactions have to be scored very quickly in under 100 milliseconds. So we're living in a sort of very fast and high volume, low latency world, which makes, being responsible and fair with the AI exceedingly important. What that means is we have to enhance the overall value. If we can be responsible, we have to make sure that the judgments we make are all the things that Suresh mentioned in his opening presentation about being fair, unbiased, and be able to establish that trust. Ultimately, we have to make those large-scale applications work with the responsible AI. So what did that mean? I'll move on quickly. So what we did, we established last year the trust framework. The trust framework is a 5-word acronym with 5 pillars. You can see that, what they mean. So it has to be transparent. I think maybe preaching to the converted here, so I'll go quite quickly. So making sure that our decisions we make in terms of the fraud or money laundering risk are always explained. It's not black box. So for every score, every decision that we make, there has to be explanations alongside it to help the analysts make the final decision. We find, of course, that criminals adapt very quickly. They look for weaknesses and they adapt when there's failures in the network or when systems go down, they're very, very quickly onto that. So we have to make sure that the models we build don't degrade over time as things evolve. So that's being robust. In terms of being unbiased, making sure that it doesn't build in inherent bias as we learn and teach the AI. Must reserve that. It has to be secure so that we don't delete data that could be useful just because we fear that it might be compromised or breached. And then finally, we have to make sure that it's tested so that they keep performing well in production and not just in a test environment. So those are the 5 pillars that we put into our trust framework. And the idea with the trust framework is to make this very practical guide for an organization to assess their AI maturity in terms of the use of responsible AI. So it has evaluation questions and open source code built from real world experience and a whole range of patterns. So behind each of these pillars, there have been a number of different research projects or patents that support the findings that Feedzai has made in this space. So I'm just going to quickly walk through each of those pillars in turn. So the first one was transparent. So when we want to obviously get to be transparent, we've got to avoid what everybody describes as the black box. And we measure transparency on 2 themes. Both one is explainable AI and the other one is AI governance. On the explainable AI, we must make sure that every decision has a traceable path and that makes sure that the users can understand why a decision was made. That's the user that ultimately makes the decision. but also in the case of, audit and compliance, making sure that the auditor can also see why a decision was made. I should add that in fraud and financial crime prevention, the systems that are built very rarely actually intervene in the transaction itself. It rather gives a score that rates the risk element, and then it's ultimately the financial institution that makes the decision whether to interrupt the transaction or contact the customer, for example. And then with AI governance as well, coming back to that process of being able to explain why decisions were made, being able to justify why actions were taken, it's critical to have that AI governance in place. And as I said, when you're making decisions in below less than 100 milliseconds, this has all got to be in place, and it's got to be robust. And making sure that the AI is informing the human decision, not just replacing it. So I mentioned, I won't go into detail on this slide because it's probably going to shock people, but just as an example, I've included it here for this particular pillar, this first one, on transparency, just to show that, behind each of these pillars, there's been a lot of research work done. Some of it, I say, is available as open source on GitHub. A lot of research papers written to enable us to explain, what we mean by transparency and how you measure it, and being able to explain to the users why decisions were made. So I won't do this for every one of the 5 pillars, because obviously this would be a whole presentation on itself, but just to provide evidence that the methodology behind it is supported by research. As well as the research, then we have a set of questions that people can use to assess their own maturity. So things like, are the models created and documented in a clear way? Are there any papers and codes that are available to support it? And as I said at the beginning, do the users who are being asked to respond to the AI decisions, do they have everything explained for each decision that they're confronted with? Moving on to the next pillar in terms of robustness. We know is the performance stable? Is it going to degrade over time? And you can just see here on this slide just some of the headlines that I guess we're all aware about. Sometimes where airlines, chatbot makes the wrong decision, or there's what we call hallucinations, or models just degrade over time. So that what started out as a very effective model becomes out of date. And in our world, that fraud prevention, that's absolutely critical, because the criminals will exploit any weaknesses they find if the model does degrade. Absolutely essential that we keep those models in place to protect the consumer. So to achieve this, we focus on 2 themes. We look at the adaptability of the AI and the consistency of the AI. So the adaptability makes sure the systems handle all the noise and data drift, and maybe seasonal fluctuations, be it like Black Friday events or festival shopping and things like that, where maybe people do have a different pattern of behavior, different trends. We need to be able to make sure that we don't start making the wrong decisions are made. And making sure that the outputs are predictable, stable, even when it's under very high volume usage. So back a few years ago when we had the COVID-19 outbreak, seems a long time ago now. We'd already deployed these models to make sure that despite the massive changes in spending patterns, the AI was still delivering very, very high level of performance. So Ravi, I think, sorry, that you sent a question in. So why do models degrade over time? It's partly because the data changes and the customer behaviors change, but most importantly, the criminals will adapt. They will always be looking for weaknesses. They'll always be inventing new types of fraud attacks. You only got to think of scams. So, romance scams moving from payments on account to account, when controls were put in place, then the criminals would move to maybe making the payments through cards. And these are really sophisticated adjustments. One particular example for it was that the criminals will work out, even for each individual bank, what controls they have in place and what thresholds are there, but even where they have their fraud defenses. So, in the case of a misrepresentation scam, when somebody basically tries to say, represent the bank and ask their victim to transfer money, they would find out which bank it was. If the bank had link controls onto their branch networks, then the scammers would just continue with that victim and try and make them to do an online payment. In the case of elderly people, I mean, that's not always the way they would make their payments, but they managed to persevere. But if they detected that the user was with a bank that maybe didn't have the same controls in their branch network, then they would adapt their strategies and send the victim into the branch to make the payment rather than make it online. So with all this sophistication, the models have to adjust and have to be recognizing the fact that the criminals have changed their attack method. I hope that answers your question. And again, there's questions again that we provide in part of the framework. There is a QR code, by the way. But if not, do contact me afterwards. Happy to share the framework in detail. This is just an excerpt. But you can see the questions here. So measuring yourself, again, the maturity. Are there monitoring mechanisms in place to make sure things aren't drifting, and making sure that maybe people are attacking in a new way, and the models are suited to protect against it. In terms of being unbiased, again, lots of stories hit the press here, right? The last thing a financial institution wants is to find themselves, guilty of making biased decisions. So, benefits fraud, or, even on down to an individual postcode, or social media. And often, sometimes the initial reaction is, okay, well, if we're making biased decisions based on our machine learning models, we should just remove that data that's contributing. So we should remove, for example, the age or the postcode. But in fact, that just makes things worse. And it doesn't help to remove the data, because there are other factors within the data that will still continue that bias. So you have to measure it, and you have to use that in your judgments. So we define this pillar of unbiasedness with called fair AI and inclusive AI. So in terms of fair, making sure that it comes up with the right outcomes. As I said at the beginning, right, you're never going to be 100% unbiased, but you have to be able to measure it and make sure that the results for the consumers are reasonable and equitable to the best of your power, right? You also have to make sure that it's inclusive, so that even with diverse populations, with different consumers, they still get the right decisions. So again, this was where we brought in Fair GBM to conduct regular bias audits, making sure that as soon as we detect any small bias creeping into the models, then we know how to address it, and correct it before it gets out of control. And then you'll see the sort of headlines that I've just shown. So that's why we measure it, and always measure that with performance. Again, the questions. So don't ignore data just because you think it's maybe contributing to bias, because it will only make it worse. Making sure there's a human process to review the systems and unfair decisions, and make sure that for people of all abilities, and doesn't exclude any part of the population. And moving on to secure. So again, making sure that the AI cannot be compromised. We know that generative AI is being both used for good and for bad. We know that occasionally data leaks happen, data breaches happen. So how can we make sure, how do you endeavor to make your AI secure, especially when AI grows in the complexity? So we have two aspects to this. We have the data protection, so ensuring that the system complies with privacy laws, and measuring that, and make sure that individuals have the clear controls over their own personal data, which obviously things like GDPR demands. And then in terms of the technical protection, using encryption, input sanitization, and continuous monitoring, is something that we actively simulate through using sort of evasion attacks, where fraudsters mimic normal patterns to try and trick the models. And we use it by both by training both on clean data, so normal business data, but also we train against manipulated data, so that we can assess that we are picking up when data is manipulated, and we don't just keep saying, yeah, it's fine because it's working with clean data. And also we make sure that we only use the sort of the minimum or the best data for making those fraud and those risk decisions. Over the last few years, there's been an increasing amount of data that can be used, that is available by banks. Obviously, now the world's gone digital. There's a lot more information that is available digitally than there was 5 years ago. So one thing could be say, oh, just let's use it all. But actually, half of the time we spend in deployment is understanding which data gives the most reliable results and contributes the best decisions for the risk decision, and which data probably is just noise and will just make things complicated and hard to adjust, and potentially introduce security issues. So understanding which is the right data to use is just as important as being able to make the decisions on it. So, do we need to encrypt data sensitivity? Is it really necessary, that piece of data? And are stress tests available? So all these questions, all these checkpoints are part of this framework. Finally, tested. So making sure that the data is tested, making sure that it is working and doing as intended. So it goes beyond just technical metrics to evaluate how does the AI affect the actual people using it, and making sure that there's not an over-reliance on automation. So one of the principles we have is actually one of the first decisions to make is it actually AI required, or can the same results be achieved using different techniques without AI? But assuming that AI is offering the benefits, and in our world of fraud and financial crime prevention, there are significant benefits over using AI compared to, say, the more traditional methods of rules, partly because of, I mentioned, that adaptability and the speed to identify, changing criminal behavior. So we measure it on two themes. We look at the user aligned, so only deploying AI that was specifically designed for, not tailoring something and using it in other areas, and making sure that it's comprehensively tested. We're using AIs and human oversight, as I mentioned, A/B testing as well. So, just because things work in test environments with maybe non-production data doesn't always mean to say that it's going to work in real life. So we have to make sure that with the production data, it's also just as effective and works as well with the humans, the analysts, as we call them in operational terms, that it's effective for them to use as well. And again, set of questions. Is it comprehensive user acceptance? Are there clear governance processes? Are environments in place for the test and production data? So those are the 5 pillars. As I mentioned, it overlaps quite a bit with some of the guidance that Suresh was giving. So it's great to see that, through different paths, we've come to similar conclusions. As I say, ours is built very much in the fraud and financial crime domain, which is high volume, low latency, needing for rapid decisions. But a lot of the patterns and a lot of the research we've done is applicable in other industries as well. So sort of in summary, we offer we use the trust framework, but we offer it out as well as a guide to provide a practical scorecard for people to assess their AI readiness and make sure they're covering as far as possible all the necessary considerations that go into a accountable and an assured AI system deployment. So, for example, are the decisions clearly explained? And made obvious for the users, avoiding any black box scenarios, which we always talk about. Is it robust? Does it maintain reliability over time, even when maybe the conditions are out there and people are trying purposely to break it? Will it still perform without making any biased decisions, or where there is some bias, being able to identify that rapidly and being able to adjust and eliminate any significant bias in the decisions that are made. And again, most of the battle is being able to identify the level of bias, making sure that the sensitive data is protected by encryption, the secure aspect, and making sure that you only use the data that is really effective in delivering both performance and fairness. Because ultimately, you want to maintain this system. The more data that you use, the more involved it will be to maintain it. So, finding the best data is always important. And finally, making sure it's tested so that it can perform not only in tests but also in production, which is, of course, where it needs to work and needs to perform. So Feedzai Research, we spend a lot of time investing in what things need to happen and what comes next. We want to move fast. We want to fix things because we know that if we don't, then financial institutions and ultimately their customers will be exposed to the increasing fraud threats, which obviously has only been increased in the past year or two with the use of generative AI being able to increase the attack mechanisms. But with the right framework in place, then we believe institutions have got a great opportunity to maintain those defenses and protect the consumers in the right way. So that's what I was going to cover. As I say, there's a QR code, but if that doesn't work, then please do email me afterwards, and I'll be happy to provide more information on what we're doing at Feedzai, both in terms of the trust framework, but in other research as well in our field.
Right. Thanks,
Thanks
Robert.
very much.
Thanks for your valuable presentation. There's one question here which you didn't answer, I think. What about
Okay.
ethics in the trust acronym?
I think comes into the responsible part as well. So when we measure fairness, when we measure the unbiasedness, that is a component of it. So it is included there in terms of what we do.
Okay, sounds
Thank-
good. All right,
Right.
thanks,
So
Robert. I guess
I better
next,
stop.
yeah,
Oh, am I still sharing?
yeah, you are still sharing.
Let me. Is that? Do I stop sharing? It says that. Am I sharing? I think I've stopped. Have I?
No, it's still sharing. Let me
Maybe you can do it. It says
refresh
new
that
share.
one with mine.
It says share.
Okay, I kind of,
Can you stop me? Yeah, you've done
yeah,
it.
yeah, I
You've done
stopped.
it. Yeah. 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 Okay. Thanks, Suresh. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now we are into the third presentation from Thai. by Taiye. Taiye Lambo is heading an organization called, a non-profit organization called Holistic Information Security and Privacy Institute. So they developed a trusted AI maturity model, which he will be presenting. Yes, I will allow Taiye to present. So Taiye, I think you will be able to present now. Or let me stop my sharing. Yeah, I think you should be able to present now. You're not audible, or I don't know if you're talking or not.
Sorry about that. Hi, Suresh.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute with multiple screens. So thank you for obviously the opportunity to share your platform, your AI Authority platform with me. Can everybody see my screen? Suresh, can you see the screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, I was told I have about 2 hours at least. I'm just kidding. I can really talk for 2 hours, especially on stuff I'm passionate about. So, Ty Lambo, I'm the founder of the Holistic Information Security Practitioner Institute, mouthful. We've been around just a little bit over 20 years. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia, which is obviously the home of Coca-Cola, CNN, Home Depot, Equifax, and the world's busiest airport. Just a bit of a fun fact. About 10 years ago, I signed up to be the first CISO for the city of Atlanta. And lo and behold, the airport was part of my responsibility. So I was responsible for 40 departments, including general funds, but we also had responsibility for the aviation or the Department of Aviation, which obviously happens to be the city, the Atlanta Hartsfield, Jackson International Airport. So it was more than a job; it was a mission. So that happened almost exactly 10 years ago. So I was relatively my tenure was relatively short. It was about 18 months, just about the average tenure of a CISO before they either get burnt out or approach burnout. So that's kind of my part of my claim to fame, was taking on that really thankless job. So HISPI has been around for about 20 years. My background is I've been in IT about 30 plus years, who's counting? I think specifically about 35 years. I've been in information security now, cybersecurity, gosh, almost 30 years as well. I started my IT career in the UK. Lived in the UK for 10 years, been in Atlanta now for 23 years, 23, maybe 20, going on 24 years. HISPI started because I saw a gap in the industry, mainly around security leadership. I saw the need to bring all these different frameworks and standards together. The ISO standards, the NIST, here in the US, compliance, PCI, SOX, GLBA, just kind of harmonize all the different efforts. So I think in the history of HISPI, we've been used to solving big problems. And so 3 years ago, we started this initially started as a think tank, and now it's a AI governance community of practice. So we have CISOs, CISOs from, major states, in the US, such as Washington State, both the CIO and the CISO are founding members. And Washington just happens to be the head office for a lot of major tech companies like Microsoft, like I think Amazon. So we're kind of in that ecosystem where we're trying to bring everybody together from both government, private, NGO, through this community of practice. So the trusted AI model we launched within 90 days of starting this community of practice. So our impact statement is we believe AI should cause no harm. It should enhance the quality of human life by pretty much proactively adopting our AI governance framework. So the trusted AI model, even though it has the word model in the name, it's really more about governance. So it's a AI governance framework, and we launched, the first iteration of that within our first 90 days. So we started our first meeting, monthly meeting, April 2023, and by the end of July 2023, we had launched version one of the trusted AI model, which obviously I'm going to be talking about. So the vision is providing effective, guardrails for safe, secure, responsible, trustworthy AI. When we first started, it was just safe, secure AI use case, and now we kind of expanded that to include responsible and trustworthy AI use cases. So we're very, very focused on use cases. I listened to the tail end of Robert Harris's presentation, and um, it sounds like the focus for their group, the trust framework may be like rating and assessing like the algorithms and the LLMs, etc., which is great. I think there's a big need for that. What we're focused on is the use, right? So every individual, every organization has use cases around AI. So we're not saying, Gen AI, ChatGPT is bad, or Claude is bad, or Gemini is bad. We're saying, let's help you assess the use of that. So everything, in our opinion, as security leaders and IT leaders, starts with a use case, right? So whether you're private, government, military, you have to come with a use case. And the use case typically would be, what is the business need, or what is the mission need if you're a government agency or military, etc. So we sort of focus on the use case, right? And we believe most enterprises have hundreds, maybe thousands of AI use cases. So the whole idea is helping them to like navigate what's a safe use, what's secure use, what's responsible use, and what's trustworthy use for that AI system. Whether it's generative AI or agentic AI, what have you. So our mission is to be the foremost thought leader and advocate for enabling harmonization efforts around best practices, standards, and frameworks within that AI ecosystem, which could be any industry. So if you look at the diagram I'm sharing, just to make sure, can everybody see my screen? You see the vision and mission that I'm sharing at the moment? Thumbs
Yes,
up if you can.
yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So this diagram was something I sort of scribbled on a napkin when the idea first kind of came to me. And if you go to projectcerebellum.com, you can learn more about, just how observing a small squirrel, climbing up and down a tree in my backyard pretty much created that, or resulted in that epiphany where I suddenly realized that we need balance around AI, and the cerebellum, which is the brains behind our brains, kind of depicts what gives us balance as humans. For squirrels, it's actually their tails that give them balance. Not sure what it is for rabbits, but for squirrels, it's definitely their tails. And for us humans, what gives us motion balance is our cerebellum, which is the brains behind, which is actually a smaller brain, smaller size than our frontal lobe, but it actually is the one that helps us to be more coordinated and more balanced in our movement. So we're sort of seeing Project Cerebellum the same way. A friend of mine used the analogy, the AI race, AI is going at 200 miles an hour, right? It's like a car going at 300 miles an hour. You're trying to fix the brakes, and you just so realize, it just so happens that the brakes happens to be a smart brake that may be defective and could be hacked, right? So just to kind of throw in additional, complexity. So we kind of see the different layers within a trusted AI model as the governance layer, the risk management layer, then trust being kind of at the heart of everything. and then the life cycle processes that pretty much touches, the governance, risk management, and trust layers. So we put that in a diagram, and we're constantly expanding this. So it's around the ISO frameworks, the NIST, the British standard / ISO framework. And then obviously the NIST AI risk management framework is kind of the core, of that framework. So AI could be a powerful tool, but it could also be a weapon. It could be weaponized. And the reason why is there are risks associated with using any type of technology. This is not unique to AI. So there was actually one of the first well-known incidents happened about 3 years ago with the Australian Research Council. So they issued an RFP, and the RFP was supposed to be a confidential RFP, and then request for proposal. And then responses started trickling in, and they noticed the responses were very similar. And obviously, this RFPs was supposed to be like confidential. The actual RFP wasn't made public. Like it was sent out to like a limited set of respondents, right? And so they had to issue obviously being a research institute, they were able to figure out why those proposals were very similar. And it looked like a lot of the respondents were using ChatGPT, to respond to the RFP, which meant they were uploading information from the confidential RFP into public ChatGPT. And obviously that's why the responses look similar, because the output from, to the prompts from ChatGPT look fairly similar. So they had to issue like a kind of a notice / advisory to the respondents to say, this is a confidential RFP. You're not supposed to be using ChatGPT or putting this out in the public domain. This is just one example of generative AI risk. So in this particular instance, nobody died, as far as we know, nobody, limbs, or lives weren't harmed in any way. But we've actually seen cases where there's been actual real world harm, due to AI, what we call unintended consequences, such as, which we define as harm. So when we say harm, what we really mean is unintended consequences. So we came up with a list of 72 controls based on the NIST AI risk management framework. And out of those 72, which is basically 6 dozen controls, we narrowed down like 20 of those controls that you must have. Like for every AI use case, you want to do an assessment against these 20 controls. And that's what I'm going to be discussing for the next, I would say 30 minutes or so. And then hopefully we'll still have some time for Q&A. So there are 12 incidents that we map to those top 20 controls. And I'm going to be showcasing how we did the mapping, the rationale behind the mapping. But I would say the one that is probably the most impactful will be the one related to the wrongful arrest of 3 men, which happened a couple of years ago. And we've seen similar incidents happen in the past year or two as well. So none of this involves lives actually being lost. But we've actually, we started tracking AI incidents just a few weeks ago. I think so far we tracked over 8,000 incidents, that has happened over the past 40 years. And we actually seen a pattern, which we're also going to be factoring into our future top 20 controls. So the incident list is going to expand to maybe 20 to maybe 50 incidents. And then we're going to be mapping them to say, okay, which controls within our trusted AI model could have prevented these types of incidents. So that way, if folks do an assessment based on our trusted AI model, using our trusted AI model score or TAME score platform, they can determine where they are from a risk standpoint. So do they have a high AI incident probability, or do they have a low AI incident probability? So we're bringing that sort of knowledge, and I call it tribal knowledge of controls, because that's something HISPI has done for 20 plus years. So we're bringing that to bear. All right, so the trusted AI model has 4 domains. NIST actually calls them functions. So govern, map, measure, manage. So we actually have like a short 5-minute video on our website, projectcerebellum.com, that pretty much tells you or shows you what those functions actually mean. So I'm just going to post the link to the chat for those who may be wondering what exactly I just said. So hopefully I typed it right. So govern is the governance around your AI use case, and then map is how you map your use case to risks, and then measure is how you measure risk. And then the manage is how you manage incidents, unintended outcomes, how you get feedback, the feedback loop, between your users and the developers, so just making sure you have this ongoing process of continuously improving not only the use case, but obviously the value of that AI system. All right. So the actual trusted AI model is in a spreadsheet. It has 72 rows, one heading. So there's a total of 73, but the first row is just the headings, like you say. So I just wanted to give you the visual. And then it has over 30 columns. So those 30 columns are the crosswalk. So that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's a lot of the work we've done. Both I had the harmonization working group. We have 3 working groups. I had at harmonization, we have a advocacy and education working group, and then we also have a partnerships and adoption working group. So I actually lead the harmonization working group, and I have a co-lead, Alistair, who obviously is very, very, he used to work for Microsoft and is very, very deep into like the technology aspects of AI, especially agentic AI. So he actually is one of the co-founders for an AI startup company called Iridius. But what we do is, as volunteers, we actually take all these different controls, from different standards, different frameworks, and we crosswalk them within our trusted AI model. So the whole idea is breaking down those silos. So instead of just doing, let's say, ISO 42001, which is AI management system, in silos, you could actually say, okay, I'm going to adopt the trusted AI model because it already includes NIST AI risk management framework. It also already includes ISO 42001. It has other standards like, 24028, which is trustworthiness in AI. So that way you implement one model and you comply with many. So that's sort of the idea. And that's something HISPI has been doing for about 20 years with cybersecurity frameworks. All right, so let's do a bit of a deep dive. So we're going to look at the first top 20 control, which is Govern 2.2. So I think the best way to really kind of showcase this is to also show you like the notes. So within our trusted AI model assessor workshop, we actually have like these notes that we included in so rather than just showing PowerPoint slides, we actually have like detailed notes that shows you like what is the rationale behind those crosswalk or the mappings. So I'm just going to just switch to that. Can everybody see the different file I'm sharing with notes, with slide notes?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So so this slide just focuses on what is the control, what is the risk statement around that control, what control group does it belong to? So in this case, it's govern. What is the control area? What is the actual control, and what are the crosswalk? And then I remember Robert mentioned like different responsible AI principles, like fairness. So we actually have 7 responsible AI principles, and they're not 7 that we created. We don't like to reinvent the wheel. We took the responsible AI principles from Microsoft. I think we had some from IBM and I think Accenture, all publicly sourced, based on public information. One of our one of our community of practice members is the CIO for the United Nations Joint Staff Pension Fund, which is the largest pension fund in the world. And he actually sits on the Technology Advisory Board for the Vatican. He's the CIO for UN Joint Staff Pension Fund, but as a volunteer, he also advises the Vatican. And they have something called the Rome Call. So Rome, like Italy, so romecall.org. They have their own principles. So we took all these different principles, we harmonized them. So we came up with 7. And then we also provided the why behind, so like fairness slash impartiality. The why is you need to be explainable. Your algorithm, your use case needs to be explainable. So we kind of break it down by not only the what the principle is, but why you want to have that principle. So generally speaking, there are 3 whys, explainable, explainability, ethical, and what's the third one? Actually, may actually be 2. Ethical. Ethical is the third one, right? So most principles will fall on those 3 whys. All right. So this one, I just wanted to kind of explain the rationale. So this particular control could have been mitigated. So the incident, I'm sorry, could have been mitigated by Govern 2.2. So I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but Microsoft launched a product called Taiye, which was a chatbot, TAY, which actually went rogue because a lot of the data it was pulling were garbage. So garbage in, garbage out. So within a few hours of them putting it online in 2016, it actually started spilling out racial slurs and, white supremacist propaganda, also called for a genocide as well. So obviously they pulled it down and it hasn't seen the light of day since then. So how could they have prevented this? In our opinion, just based on the research we've done, based on public information, as part of the govern process, maybe during the strategy phase or the design phase of that chatbot, they probably should have said, okay, how do we make sure that the folks that are building the system, supporting the system, have AI risk management training, making sure they can predict what could go wrong and they can figure out ways, maybe have guardrails to make sure that the data, the chatbot is consuming to some extent is sanitized to make sure that you don't have this type of unintended consequences. So who knows? Maybe if they hadn't shut it down, maybe this could have been better than Chat GPT. Who knows? So they were also early as well, but that's a good example of why you have to have guardrails as part of pretty much before even your design phase of any type of AI system. All right, so the next one is Govern 6.1. This one is very interesting because it's not, garbage in. Well, it was kind of garbage in, garbage out, but this will fall under like AI forgery. So while the previous one was really more about AI being manipulated, this second one was about AI pretty much just making stuff up. So in this case, the lawyer, and you probably had about most of these examples, cited ChatGPT in a case law, and they actually won the case on behalf of their client. And then the judge found out that the the case law they cited was just made up, pretty much just made up from nothing. And the judge was furious. And what they did is they reversed their decision, and eventually that lawyer actually got disbarred. So that is one clear example of why you want to fact check and you want to just make sure that you already know what you want before you actually leverage any type of Gen AI to give you maybe enhance your knowledge of what you already know. But at the minimum, you got to be able to fact check whatever output you're getting from your LLM of choice or Gen AI product of choice. So this one could have been prevented just by having policies and procedures that address the risk. So that law firm, for instance, should have had a policy. Maybe they did, who knows? But they probably should have enforced that policy that said, if you're going to use AI for client work, you need to address the risk. You need to make sure that, these types of things that could go wrong could be mitigated, right? So that's just an example. All right, so I'll move on to maybe a few more, and then we can just leave this open for discussion. So just bear with me. The third one, which actually is the one that I said is like probably the worst of them all, were three guys were actually arrested because they were falsely flagged. Um, I think it was something to do with the facial recognition system, falsely flagged them as suspects. Luckily, before they got charged, or before they actually were prosecuted, the case they found out it was a false flag, and they obviously released them and they dropped the case. Thankfully, they didn't end up in jail. But this is an example where within the map function of your AI use case, you need to make sure that you factor in the different demographics that the system is going to be like the real world. I would say the data it's going to be consuming to make sure that during your test process, the folks that were, are going to be using the system or, be impacted by the system in the real world in your test environment, you factored in those types of demographics. So I think this one was definitely a lesson well taught and well learned as well. But we're still seeing cases of mistaken identity due to biometrics, unintended outcomes or consequences or false flags. So I think this is going to be with us for a long time, but at least being aware and making sure you have the guardrails to prevent these types of incidents is important. All right, so the next one, which is now going to map as well. So we started with the govern 2.2, map, and then obviously another map control within our trusted AI model. So this one was very interesting because OpenAI 3 years ago actually received a class action lawsuit over data privacy because somehow they were consuming a lot of data and they still are, but they obviously didn't take into consideration or proper consideration the privacy of the individuals that they were scrapping data on. So there was a class action lawsuit. I'm not sure where that went. I don't know if it actually held up in court. Or it's probably still on because sometimes these things take like years, or in some cases like a whole decade, for the lawsuit or for the case to be resolved. And it typically ends in like some sort of settlement where they don't admit fault and they're willing to pay some sort of penalty or fine or compensation without admitting fault. So I don't know where this one's going to go, but it's probably still ongoing. But this would have been prevented if they just factored in, hey, let's put into consideration the privacy, respect for privacy, for the folks that were mining their data, which is pretty much any one of us. Anything you put out on the public domain, just assume it's fair game, for any type of LLM system. Doesn't even have to be OpenAI's ChatGPT system. All right, so let's move on to the next one. This one is in relation to a lawyer also citing a fake case. So I'm going to skip this one. The control itself is unique because it's on that map, but we've already talked about that particular incident. So the next incident that we haven't mapped or looked at yet is the AI generated Seinfeld show that was banned on Twitch. This one was also AI being used to perpetuate bias. So I would say it was a corruption of the AI system. So the basically the Seinfeld show was AI generated, or the one on put on Twitch, which is a platform apparently. Basically started spurring out transphobic material. And apparently the channel was called Nothing Never, which is also very interesting. And so the gist of this one is just make sure that your AI system considers impacts to individuals, groups, and communities and society at large, right? Before you put that system into production and constantly monitor that system to make sure that it's, kind of treating people fairly. I think that's really the gist of that one. The next one, which is Measure 2.2, actually maps to a Myanmar facial recognition system that threatens the country of Myanmar rights, human rights, pretty much. So they were using facial recognition of the government over there for mass surveillance. Like that never happens even in Western countries, right? Um, Case in point, the Anthropic versus Department of War, what do I even call it? I've said disputes that we saw unfold in the past 1 week. So Anthropic pretty much said, you're not going to use our systems for mass surveillance. And the DoD was like, yeah, we need an exception to that rule. And Anthropic was like, no, no exceptions. And eventually the DoD or Department of War now decided to ban Anthropic. So unprecedented, um, as they say. So this actually happened back in 2021, and you see, this things they could have done, right? Making sure that the human subjects are protected with any type of AI system. All right, so I'm going to maybe cover maybe one or two more, and I'm going to leave this open for discussion. How are we for time, Suresh? How much more time do we have?
We have 13 more minutes.
Okay, so I'll wrap up in 3 minutes, and then we can at least have 10 minutes for Q&A. All right, so this one, I think, yeah, this one's sad because it was actually parents that took their baby to the emergency room. They were flagged as potentially abusing their child. And it was something to do with the child's allergies or allergic reaction to a particular milk. And the system literally flagged them as abusive parents. But it was a false flag. So what does this tell you? When you have an AI system, always measure to make sure the system is producing the intended consequences, right? So having what they call TEVV, which is test, evaluation, verification, and validation would have helped to maybe reduce the likelihood of something like this actually happening. But no system is 100% proof. You can try as much as possible. Something's going to go wrong at some point. It's how quickly you can detect it and how proactive you can be to prevent future mishaps or harms. I think is the key. But just having this as part of your ongoing measurement process to check for unintended consequences. So luckily, they didn't go to jail. They were able to figure out, well, they probably defended themselves and quickly they were able to figure out that this was a false flag. I want to just maybe find one under manage that may be a good one to just showcase, but because we sort of run out of time, so I'll just scroll up or scroll down a little bit to, okay, Vanderbilt University, that's still under measure. So they use ChatGPT to write an email in response to a mass shooting in Michigan State University, just assuring their students that they're taking safety seriously, etc. But at the end of the email, they had a quote from ChatGPT or a reference to ChatGPT, and the student body was outraged. Like, if you're going to send a sensitive email that shows you have empathy for us, why would you even not bother to remove the reference to ChatGPT? Like it wasn't really heartfelt if it was created by ChatGPT. So, I mean, you could agree or disagree with the student body's outrage, but that's how they feel, right? So just making sure you have mechanisms in place to provide feedback, before anything goes out to the community, especially when AI use is involved. That would have been a simple Q&A fix, right? They could have easily just made sure they did a proper Q&A of the email, and somebody would have caught that before it was too late. All right, so this one under manage is going to be the last one that I cover. There was actually an image of the Pentagon exploding, and this headline is very sensational. It said it caused the stock market to crash. It didn't crash. It was just a dip in the stock market. It fell by 0.26%. Now, if you if you have $100, £100 or euro stock, 0.26% is not a lot in the big scheme of things. But if you had $1 billion, maybe it is, right? So, but it did cause a small dip in the stock market. But obviously, folks quickly realized it was a hoax. So AI could cause chaos, especially with misinformation and disinformation. So I think that's the gist of that. So within the manage function of our trusted AI model, making sure you sort of look at the benefits and potentially the negative impacts of AI use, right? So with this one, it was somebody putting out a rogue individual or individuals putting out misinformation and disinformation. So how can you really prevent that? I mean, I guess you can try and catch it as quickly as possible and be able to respond, in real time or near real time. But it boils down to just making sure that you're prepared, for these types of unintended consequences. So I think that's pretty much the gist of what I had to present. I will just leave it open for like maybe Q&A for 10 minutes, just to hear from you, or, if any of this resonated with you, feel free to share your perspective. But we have a platform that we built that is an assessment platform, but we've also included like a gamification where you could actually play a game based on all these different scenarios, and it'll give you a score. And what I find in my experience is no matter how ethical I think my decisions are, ultimately the business always wins. So I can make the most ethical decisions, and eventually my financial performance for that fictitious company in the game could be really bad based on the best ethical decisions I made. So I guess the gist of it is you have to find a balance somewhere, right? You don't want to go too far to one extreme that you're actually starting to lose money and the business is no longer sustainable. But if you want to see more or know more about that, I provided the email contacts here, and obviously feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. So, all right. I think one last minute for Q&A. So I want to hear from you all and just hear your thoughts on everything I presented so far.
Yeah. Anyone has any question to Taiye? Okay, I don't see any questions, Taiye. So I think, yeah, that's a great presentation.
Thank you.
I because I know the model, so I'm I'm pretty comfortable with that. But for the other folks, I think this will be more valuable, I guess. And for those who don't know, HISPI and sorry. Yeah, HISPI and AI Authority has signed an MOU, so we'll be doing some research activities and some other activities together. So look for our information on. So follow us on LinkedIn and as well as on the YouTube, and we have other forum social media platforms as well. So yeah. Thank you all for joining us in this webinar, and we will, post you the April session shortly. And thank you, Robert and Taiye, for your presentations, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Suresh. Thanks for having me. And everyone, please stay in touch and stay safe.
Okay. So.